Today, we're diving into one of the most devastating acts of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, the Oklahoma City bombing. This shocking event on April 19, 1995, shook the nation to its core, leaving 168 dead, including 19 children, and over 600 others injured. It was an attack that forever changed the way America viewed terrorism within its own borders, forcing the country to confront the horrifying reality that such a brutal act could come not from a foreign adversary, but from one of its own citizens. The bomb's detonation was felt miles away, both physically and emotionally, and its aftermath was one of collective grief, confusion, and anger. The bomb targeted the Alfred P. Mora Federal Building, a structure located in the heart of Oklahoma City. What made this act even more heinous was the fact that the building housed a daycare center, where many children were present that morning. The massive explosion tore through the building, reducing it to rubble, with an entire face of the structure collapsing in seconds. First responders and ordinary citizens alike rushed to the scene, pulling survivors from the wreckage in a desperate race against time. But who could commit such a horrific crime? The answer stunned the world. Timothy McVeigh, a U.S. Army veteran who had turned against his government, carried out the bombing in a twisted act of revenge. At 9:02 a.m., a truck loaded with 4,800 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer and fuel oil exploded just outside the federal building. The blast was catastrophic, causing a third of the building to collapse within seconds and shattering windows in nearby structures up to 10 blocks away. The bomb's power was equivalent to over 5,000 pounds of TNT, and the damage it caused was unimaginable. Emergency crews raced to the scene, working tirelessly in the chaotic aftermath to save those trapped in the debris. The death toll continued to rise as the hours and days passed, with bodies being pulled from the rubble as search and rescue efforts persisted. The impact of the bombing was not limited to the destruction of the federal building. Nearby structures were also severely damaged, and the streets of downtown Oklahoma City were littered with debris. Cars were overturned, glass rained down from shattered windows, and smoke filled the air. It was a scene that could easily have been mistaken for a war zone. Timothy McVeigh, who was apprehended just 90 minutes after the bombing during a routine traffic stop for having no license plate on his getaway car, held extremist anti-government views. McVeigh, who had served in the Gulf War, became disillusioned with the U.S. government, especially after the deadly standoffs at Ruby Ridge in 1992 and Waco, Texas, in 1993. He saw these incidents, in which federal agents were involved in the deaths of civilians, as proof of government tyranny. McVeigh's hatred of the federal government culminated in his decision to attack the Mora Building, which housed multiple federal agencies, including the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, ATF, a target he particularly loathed because of its role in the Waco siege. To McVeigh, the bombing was an act of retaliation against the government, a way to strike back for what he saw as the slaughter of innocent Americans at Ruby Ridge and Waco. McVeigh was not alone in planning the attack. His accomplice, Terry Nichols, helped him acquire and assemble the materials needed for the bomb. Together, they worked meticulously, constructing the explosive device in the back of a Ryder truck that McVeigh parked in front of the federal building just minutes before the detonation. McVeigh's capture was surprisingly quick, but at first, it had nothing to do with the bombing. Just over an hour after the explosion, an Oklahoma State trooper pulled McVeigh over for driving without a license plate and noticed that McVeigh had a concealed weapon. He was arrested and taken into custody. It wasn't until later, when investigators began piecing together the evidence, that they realized McVeigh was their prime suspect. The investigation quickly zeroed in on McVeigh and Nichols, and within days, both men were in custody. The meticulous nature of their planning and the overwhelming physical evidence against them led to their swift conviction. McVeigh was sentenced to death and was executed by lethal injection on June 11, 2001. Nichols, on the other hand, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Oklahoma City bombing left an indelible mark on the nation. In the immediate aftermath, the sense of loss and devastation was overwhelming. Funerals were held for the victims, and the Oklahoma community, along with the entire nation, mourned. Memorials sprang up at the site of the bombing, with flowers, photographs, and mementos left by grieving families, friends, and strangers. The attack not only took lives, but it also shattered the sense of safety that many Americans had taken for granted. The idea that such a catastrophic event could happen in the heartland of America, by one of its own citizens, was almost too much to comprehend. The Oklahoma City National Memorial was established in 2000 to honor the victims, survivors, and first responders. The memorial features 168 empty chairs, each representing a life lost, with 19 smaller chairs symbolizing the children who were killed in the attack. The site is a powerful reminder of the human toll of domestic terrorism. The bombing also had a lasting impact on U.S. law enforcement and anti-terrorism policies. In the wake of the attack, President Bill Clinton signed the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996, which strengthened the federal government's ability to track and prosecute terrorists and expanded the use of the death penalty in terrorism cases. The FBI and other law enforcement agencies also revamped their approaches to tracking and monitoring domestic terrorist threats. The bombing prompted new discussions about the rise of extremist ideologies in the U.S., particularly those linked to anti-government militias. It served as a stark reminder that the threat of terrorism does not only come from abroad, but also from within. The Oklahoma City bombing stands as one of the darkest moments in American history, but it is also a story of resilience. The community came together in the wake of tragedy, and the memory of those lost lives on through the memorials and the continued work of survivors and families to honor their legacy. While Timothy McVeigh's twisted ideology led to destruction and death, the response of the Oklahoma City community, and the nation at large, was one of unity, compassion, and a determination to never forget.